Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week we bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Welcome to the couch, Ben.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you.
Third time lucky. That's the third time we started this one this morning. Hey, I've got a bone to pick with you.
What's that?
2 weeks ago, you invite me to a Collingwood function, which was,
Collingwood game. Freo supporter. Yeah, but inner sanctum experience. Get to meet one of the assistant coaches.
Still Collingwood, so, I think there was two better offers for me to stay home. One, and pull my own toenails off, and two, probably poke my eye out with a sharp stick. But and then I'm at a movie last night with a mate.
Okay, so you go and our got some time off from the family.
Well, my wife's away for the week, so
okay. The kids are on school holidays.
Yeah. So I've caught up with the mate, and I get a text message from you at 10:25. Right, and I'm thinking, our listeners know you don't send me text messages. You don't reply to text messages. So I'm thinking,
very good at texting.
So I'm panicking. I'm thinking the building must be on fire. It must have flooded. And no, Ivis. Do you know what it was? He sends me a photo with him next to Andrew Bogut.
Andrew Bogut,
the basketballer from the NBA. Like,
just
I would love to go and rub shoulders with Andrew Bogut and talk about all things basketball. But just, mate, my invite, was it in the post? Was it in the mail?
Look, at the end of the day, we have a financial planning business, and La Trobe was sponsoring a night with the Boomers to meet the players before they head off to Rio.
All sounded pretty good so far.
It was a great night. I took a lot out of it. One of the things I did take out of it before we, talk celebrity, basically, I was listening to the head coach talk around their vision and their journey that they're going on. And this group of young players, I think we're ranked 11th in the world, and we've never medalled. I think the closest we ever got was a 4th at the Sydney Olympics. But this group of players that are coming through now, and probably the next generation, certainly are exciting. I'm a basketball tragic. I grew up playing basketball from the age of 5, running around when my parents were playing in the old pyjamas down at Coburg and Diamond Valley. The reality is that this coach and Brett Brown, who was the previous coach, have sort of galvanised this group of people, and they're really big on culture, big on these guys are highly paid professionals, and this is their off season. But the fact that they're now working really hard to gel as a team so they can get to the Olympics in the best shape that they can. I think that just speaks volumes of the journey that you go on. Life is a journey. And that's a really important part of that. Now, in terms of Andrew,
I'm not going to fall for that, mate. That was just a divergent story to avoid from the big issue here.
Well, it wasn't me who organised it. One of our partners, Michael Savvy, who runs our financial planning arm, said, there's an opportunity to go and meet the players. And I said, well, I'm happy to do that. And you've heard me mention on the podcast that we do have a couple of NBA listeners.
We do.
I never mention their names because
you never had permission.
No, that's right.
I don't wait to meet them in person to get that.
Well, that's right. And so, so I got an opportunity to meet one of the players. So I went up to Andrew last night, and I'll tell you what's great about these guys. They must get hassled all the time. Absolutely all the time. He was delightful. He was just very genuine, very open, just a regular guy. But you could imagine, there was probably 300 or 400 people at that event, and he was obviously one of the big draw cards. So he's constantly being berated. So to just keep, just being that lovely larrikin guy that he is, was really nice. To a point where, I know technology really well. I'm trying to do this selfie thing, and I have no idea how to use this phone to do a selfie. And so eventually some lady just comes over and says, can I take that photo for you? Because I'm just no good at it. So a big shout out to Andrew Bogut. He did give me permission to say hello on the podcast. So
I would have liked to have had a chance for permission. Shout out, Andrew. One day I'll get to meet you, mate. But at this stage, it's obviously just via the podcast.
So he's been listening for a long time, and he's put a couple of the other guys onto the podcast again. So that's very nice of him.
So we're international. It's making it all its way to
that's true. Maybe some of the other Boomer players might get an earful of us on their journeys as well. But anyway, all the best to the crew. I know they're in an intensive training camp at the moment. I do have the picture on my phone, so we'll put that up on the Facebook page. Is that?
And for those of you who aren't into social media, I'd actually suggest that you go, because this is a rare sighting. Ben taking a photo
with someone.
It's
rare. Trevor Hendy, I did get one with Trevor Hendy the other week, but that again, I'm new to this sort of thing. I just like these people have got their own lives, but it was just nice that he did reach out to us. There is a second one that I tried to take.
I've just seen it, folks. The photo that he tried to take. It's lucky,
this is just looked at my phone.
All I can say is it's lucky someone else came and took a photo.
Anyway, so thanks, Andrew. Lovely guy. All the best to the Australian team. That's they're doing good things, and I really think the next 2 Olympics, this one and into where are they going after that? Is it Russia? I can't remember where they are in 4 years' time from now. China? No, they've done China. Don't know. Anyway, the point I'm making is they could medal, and that's a great news story.
There you go, folks. Ben's rubbing shoulders with the Australian Olympic team, which is a nice thing. I hope you had a great night, mate.
All right, we move on. What are we doing? What are we talking about today?
A couple of things. The Facebook Live is going up to YouTube today. So those folks who missed out on the Facebook Live and they missed out on checking out it on our Facebook page, it'll be up on YouTube today as well.
Well, that was highly professional, wasn't it? That's.
Oh no, Ivis. She's
you've been able to.
Yeah.
The magic of editing.
Yes.
So those who were actually at the live event,
she cut the first 45 seconds.
Would have known that we're on a side. We were on our side to start with because the phone we were using was on our.
So that's there, folks. Go and check that out. Ben, you're on Sky News tonight at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So I'm flying to Sydney straight after this, and I'm on Your Money, Your Call.
Yep.
We're going. It's the superannuation show, but it's got a property focus tonight, so I'll be on the show, hopefully answering questions from the viewers.
I can't imagine that our listeners will be watching Sky News when they could be watching the Lifestyle Channel at the same time. Watching Location. For those who've seen the reruns, go and watch Ben. I wrote an article for the Money Mag this week that'll appear as the cover in August, so
fantastic.
Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I read that before it went out, and it's a very good article.
And there's a video that you shot regarding the RBA cash rate this week. But you've also put some commentary around the fact that the state of politics at the moment, and so if anyone's interested in getting some commentary around that, they can go to thepropertycouch.com.au or on any of our social media and see the links to that as well. Yeah,
I think the broader message there wasn't so much. I mean, Canberra's going to be a circus for the next 3 years, so the key message in that was really about looking after your own backyard, and if it is to be, it's up to me. So not worrying about what the government can provide for you, but just basically taking ownership of your own circumstances. And this is a good reminder of that. 25 years of positive economic growth, people do become complacent around, this need for what the government can provide for them. And I'm saying, well, if you want to carve your future out and your financial well-being out, then take action. Get your money working harder for you. Don't rely on the government, because unfortunately they're not going to be able to deliver, and we see that every day of the week.
Very good, very good. So today I thought we'd maybe try and freestyle a bit. For 70 odd episodes, we've given people frameworks on money management. We've given people frameworks on asset selection, but we've given them frameworks on borrowing, all that sort of stuff.
And we've got another big one coming up shortly.
We do, which is
the. Was it practicality test? You got me on the spot there, but we've done some work on that, and I think it's a really nice framework.
Yeah.
So that's going to be again talking about investment selection.
Mm-hmm.
So drilling a bit deeper behind the buyer's decision quadrant. Now, if they're not all making sense to you, obviously check out the other podcasts, and it's all in the book as well.
So what we're getting a lot of feedback with people writing and saying thanks for the information. It's giving us confidence to make a decision. So I thought we might freestyle it around. If someone's actually, this podcast comes out on Thursday, they're preparing for an auction on Saturday, they're going to check out some opens, they've got an offer in, they want to make an offer. I thought we'd give them some insights into what they're about to face, because the world of real estate agents is a world that's quite foreign to most. They don't rank very highly in surveys. Usually, second bottom, above used car salesmen. But better understanding their process will better equip the buyer to make better decisions and not fall for some of the tactics that they employ. So I thought we might freestyle it.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I mean, the most important point there is that there really are some fabulous agents out there. I mean, we went to AREC, which is the Australian Real Estate Conference, and there are some high performers, some elite negotiators, and, we're going to be talking about negotiating in the future podcast, but it really does make sense. And we might have some, real estate agent listeners as well. But on the other side of it, there are absolutely, at the end of the day, this is how they get fed. They make their money on listings and sales. So ultimately, it's about understanding what's in it for them, and then sort of seeing how you can counteract that. So whether you call this outsmarting the agent, I think it's a good start. So what have we got first, mate?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to understand what's actually going on so if our listeners have recently sold a property, or some of them might never have actually been through that process, if someone's thinking of putting their property on the market, they generally, not always, but generally are doing a caravan of agents through their living room.
Yep.
And those agents are then making a pitch as to where they think the properties should be and what the market value is, in an attempt to get the listing. Now, what some of those pitches are is, if there's not much differentiation, if the agent goes into the lounge room and says, we can get the property up on the net this week, we can send the photographer around and get world-class photos, their differentiation points really come down to their experience, their negotiation, their product knowledge. But generally speaking, they talk about we will get you a premium price.
Yep.
And by doing that, we'll be better marketers, we'll speak to more people, and then we'll use our negotiation skills to get that. So it's important to understand, if that's part of their pitch in the lounge room before you ever see the property, and they're one of three people, and then eventually they go through that interview process to then be engaged, to put the board out the front and then to get the marketing in place, you've got to understand their agenda is to get a premium price. So how do they do that? They've got to create as much competition as they possibly can. They need, the analogy I think of is, if I'm standing on the side of a lake and I'm trying to catch the really big fish and there's a school of fish around, what I want to do is I want to use the other fish to guide the bigger one into the middle of my net so that I can easily catch that.
That's a great analogy.
So with that analogy, that's what underquoting is. Because most people say, underquoting is shocking. It happens all the time, particularly in the big cities of Melbourne and Sydney. But that's ultimately one of the things that the real estate agent is trying to do. They're trying to create maximum competition. So they've got a theory of quote it low, watch it go, quote it high, watch it die. So quite simply, that means if they quote the price too high, they won't get enough people on the day, they won't get enough competition, and then they can't achieve their ultimate goal, which is the premium price. So the first thing you need to be aware of, if you're buying in an auction-centric market like the two biggest cities, but they have auctions in Adelaide, they have auctions in Perth, they have auctions all over the country, not in as huge a number, is underquoting does exist. Don't be frustrated by it. And Melbourne, for example, as a rough rule of thumb, put 15% on the lower end of the price guide. And if you're in the game at that price, well, then you should be competing. But if you're in the lower to middle range of the quote range, chances are you're going to miss out. And being armed with that information is the key.
Yeah, look, so we are licensed real estate agents. So as buyers agents, we have to be licensed to work and negotiate on behalf of our buying clients. The selling agents are doing exactly that. So I want to make the message that you will read through consumer affairs in most areas that underquoting is illegal. So you just think naturally it doesn't happen. Now, and I'll put some defence into some of the real estate agent side of it, and that is, they do go in and they do appraisals. So to convince the vendor, the seller, to actually list with them, they're going to usually use comparative sales, the same way as we're using comparative sales to comparative sales to make sure that what we're going to recommend to pay is comparable to the market, like for like, not apples versus oranges. So in some cases, this underquoting is a product of the demand in the market at that time. And right now we do have, both markets are sellers markets in Melbourne, Sydney. Brisbane's probably moving into a seller's market. Adelaide's moving into a seller's market. But so Perth, for example, it's a buyer's market. Okay, it's still coming off a little bit. So the reality is it is difficult for agents to get the quoting right. But here's something that most listeners may not understand. If you go to an offer, the classic case, Bryce said it a minute ago, quote it low, watch it go. So you go there because you're attracted by the fact that it's come up on the search engine in your price bandwidth. You go and have a look at it and you've done your homework and you know that they're probably underquoted it by at least 10%. So if you want to be not aggressive, but if you want to basically put an offer in that you think is fair market at the time, and let's say they've quoted at $500,000 and I put an offer in at $550,000. Now if I put that offer in, legally the agent must adjust their quoting range. Okay, so
if it's rejected.
If it's rejected, I mean, if it's accepted, they buy it, right? But if it's rejected, so you can potentially move that buyer's range up, and that's the law. They must do that. So if you're armed with that knowledge, you can sort of say, look, where's the expectation? Now, our good agents will keep their cards close to their chest, and they'll talk about, we're scoping out buyers' interests at the moment. And, in Queensland, I mean, I don't know what it is, that backward state up there sometimes. Apologies for some of the people living there. But in terms of their governance up there, they've banned, quoting price guides. It's just stupid. I mean,
it's actually not in the best interest of the vendor because people are proven to, if there's no price, they move on.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's frustrating.
That is,
and they're sort of doing it because they got all of this customer complaint about underquoting. Yeah. So they said, well, just banned it. I mean, you've got to give consumers some guidance. And so I just think it's poor policy. So when I say backward, I should say the people aren't backward up there, but the policymakers.
I was worried because you've offended rugby supporters.
Can we move on from that?
I
didn't offend rugby supporters. I just thought the game was interesting that you bash into each other and throw the ball backwards.
Mate.
So that's all I said. It was something along those lines.
And scratching backsides and all that sort of stuff, which is always good. Underquoting's hard to prove because there are legitimate times when the vendor doesn't give the agent the reserve until the day of the auction.
Yep.
And sometimes the reserve changes because there was only an agent the other day that I was chatting to, had a beer with one last night, and he goes, the owner saw that they'd done their job so well and brought a football crowd that he said, there's so many people out there, I now want to get more, so I want to raise the price of my reserve. So the real estate agents do have their own difficulties and challenges.
They do because even the vendors don't trust them sometimes, do they? So I know of cases where you have a good relationship with a selling agent and you say, so any chance of a guide on the reserve? And they're like, we don't even know. Like they're not even going to tell us until the auction starts. And then they come in for further instructions. I mean, that's hard for them. Yeah. And the other one that's also a classic is around, from an underquoting point of view, where buyers get very frustrated, is the fact that it might be the land that they're interested in and they're going to knock the house down. So everyone's sort of getting excited because it's in a great location and it's the worst house in the best street, and they're thinking, oh, this is good, it's in my price range, and then all of a sudden, the quoting range was 600 to 700 and the first bid is 820 and they just go, what the? I mean, because effectively they're going to knock it over and build a duplex. Now that's when they get angry at the agents, and the agents are like, well, that's not our fault. A developer bought it.
It's worth more to a developer than it is to an average person.
Correct.
Totally agree. Another thing to think about is the real estate agent, if they don't sell, they don't eat. There's no salary. For most of them, there's no base. It's just if they don't sell, they don't eat.
Yep.
So they've got families and they've got to provide. So I always say to people, don't get frustrated by the real estate agent if you understand the real estate agent process. They're on commission only. Their job is to get a premium price for their client. They don't work for you as the buyer. They work for the seller. Don't swim upriver on that.
Yeah.
So my biggest tip is we've got resources that because we've got a business that we can, economies of scale, we can pay quite hefty fees to get the comparable sales through CoreLogic.
We've got more market intelligence than the average punter.
But for most people, they can get it pretty easy. Don't judge the price by what else is on the market.
Yeah.
That's comparable.
Yeah.
Judge by what has recently been sold.
Yeah,
Realestate.com, for example, go to the sold thing and see what's sold and compare so that you are not being seduced by what's coming out of the agent's mouth. Because quote it low, watch it go. They're trying to get a premium price.
Yep.
So you're not going to necessarily get your best intel from the agent.
Yep.
What you're going to get from the agent is how many groups through, can I get a contract, is there anything in the Section 32 I should know about, is there going to be any surprises in the building, looks like the stumps need doing, is there anything else? You can get some genuine, but don't be surprised by the fact that their number one goal is to get the premium price, and they're not going to try and help you get the lowest price possible.
No, they're not. And yes, they are working on behalf of the vendor, but in reality, as you were just mentioning before, the ultimate person they're working for is themselves. So even under they might be under a large mass brand head, like a big agency group. They might be working for an independent, but even inside the offices, they're actually working for themselves. So ultimately, when you build rapport with the real estate agent, which is a big part of a good strategy, you ultimately know that at the end of the day, if they're not getting the deal over the line and their 60-day or 90-day exclusive arrangement in terms of the contract that they've signed up for the listing is coming to an end, they know that they've got to potentially start working for themselves as well. So it's not a perfect world, and again, you're coming back to that, and that's probably the theme coming through this podcast is, hey, like there's some grey. It's not just black and white in what we do in property. There is grey, and because everyone is keeping their cards close to their chest, that's why you get this grey matter. And so it's about sifting through that. Another one as an example, this just sort of jumped out in my head then is when you have a closed sale, meaning basically best offer or by submission, by sale by set date type things. There's absolutely no transparency in that. So if you are the winner, you have no idea how much more you paid over the person behind you. So, we've talked about this on the podcast before. We want transparency. So if we would try and get that to a boardroom style auction where we're seeing the paper going around. We don't like these ideas of these hidden. I've told you one of my stories before. I think I offered on an apartment in Sydney one time, $692,000. And the highest bidder I found out, we were the underbidder, was 742. So that was the difference between the two of us. Now, enormous. So it's again, there's grey matter in this, and sometimes you never know. No. What other people were willing to do or what they weren't willing to do.
That's the challenge. And so there's a few good segues you put on there. One is just to understand the real estate agent has on average a 90-day authority.
Yes.
So we can work out how many days on market the property has been. The average person finds that a little bit harder. It's not impossible, but if you know that it's getting to day 80, you've got a very, very motivated agent. So there's a negotiation tactic that you can employ yourself. But the other one you've sort of led onto it is, and I wanted to talk about is beware of pre-auction offers because they are not for the faint-hearted.
Yep.
The real estate agents have this saying that buyers are liars, right? So essentially, how much do you think it's worth? They never say, right? Or they just lowball it. So the real estate agent goes back to the vendor and says, we don't actually know what people are prepared to pay. One of the ways they can find out is to encourage and entice you to put in a pre-auction offer, but with no intention of ever selling it prior to auction, but only to flesh out what you're prepared to pay so they can give some feedback. And there is a correlation between the more the number of pre-auction offers, the higher the clearance rate. So effectively, no pre-auction offers, the clearance rate is X, but if I get one, it's X plus a bit more. If I'm getting two, it's getting close to Y. So there's a very strong correlation between that. But also understand, depending on, first of all, if you're going to put in a pre-auction offer, the number one rule is you must know the vendor motivation.
Yep.
Because if you don't know that, don't put one in.
Yes.
Because if the vendor is in, one of the dreadful Ds, debt, divorce, death, anything like that, there's some genuine motivation. But if they are in blue chip town, next to a train, beautiful cafes nearby, park across the road, that vendor is probably wanting market to slog it out on the day. So, and let's be honest, here's the key. The real estate agent does too, because we talked about the fact they're on commission only, no eat, no sell. The only way they get their next listing is making themselves visible in the marketplace and trying to differentiate themselves against the next guy.
Yep.
So if they can get a performance, they get some street theatre, they actually do a really good job, they can get a premium result on the property. All the neighbours usually gather around at the auction, so their next listing might be just standing in the crowd waiting to see how they go. If they show real flair and performance and get a really good outcome on the day, that's what they want. Why do they have in the newspaper, all the branding is about them and a little bit about the properties, because that's how they get their next listing. So pre-auction offers must be done very, very carefully, because you mentioned it before, the Dutch auction is the very thing you want to avoid.
Correct.
Because if I'm going to get into an auction, I want transparency. Like you said, a boardroom or one on the day. I don't want to get into Dutch because I don't know what the next guy's doing.
Correct. So I'll use an example. We bought a property a couple of weeks ago in Sydney for a great couple, and we wanted to knock the house over. So we were going to value add onto the land. So we were going to go a little bit higher than what the value of the property was worth, okay, just to secure the land. We've had a couple of attempts before and we'd missed out. So this time it was time for us to shine. Now, we did put a pre-offer in terms of pre-auction offer in. And what actually happened with that, and this was an interesting learning for everyone, is we took a calculated guess on whether we'd get it over the line at that price. Now, we had more in the tank, so that wasn't our highest offer, but we put the offer forward. Now, you were talking about the motivation of the vendor. It was a deceased estate, but we had 5 parties. Okay, so sometimes, and I knew that it was unlikely to potentially be accepted, but we tried to put pressure on a deadline on it, and then trying to get 5 parties all to agree, we couldn't get it happening.
Yeah,
now, the benefit of that is we tried. Because it is a hot market in Sydney at the moment in the pocket that we're trying to buy. So we said, all right, well, let's see if we can, smash it out of the park. We weren't able to do it then, but we were able to win it on the day for the same price that we offered on the pre-auction. So that was a good result for us because we still had more in the tank. But for people who are looking to renovate that house or improve that property, it didn't represent value beyond that point. But for us, it did. We still think there's probably around $100,000 to $200,000 in gross value up that we'll be able to get by knocking it over and building a beautiful new home on that site. So that's the reality. So not only are you looking for the motivation of the vendor, you're also looking for what the likelihood is. So if there's multiple parties, I knew that we weren't going to get there, but I just wanted to tempt the agent to see what I could learn from that. And what I learnt was what I expected to learn, but in some cases it just may not be worth putting that offer in because you've got multiple decision makers on the other side and it's just going to get too hard.
That's a really good point. If you've got people with differing agendas, husband and wife often share the same agenda, brother and sister don't often share the same agenda. In that situation, there's 5 of them. They're not often sharing the same life
Relationship
agenda.
breakdowns,
So that's why you must know the vendor's motivation before you put a pre-auction offer in, folks. Otherwise, you may just be playing into the hands of the agent for them to firm up the price.
And look good to the vendor. I'm getting offers. Offers. Here's one now. I'm excited about where this is going to go.
Yeah.
Look, in our case, the agent said that is a fair and reasonable offer. And my recommendation to them, because that's what you also want to do, you want them to support your offer. You want them to say, you know what, I think that is fair and reasonable. And so I'm going to deliver a fair and if you're not getting that feedback from the agent, then straight away it's not going to gather momentum. But if the agent's saying that is a fair and reasonable offer, and I would be recommending they take it because you don't know what you're going to get on the day. And if you're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 different properties, that could be one buyer that may walk away. So, that's what the agent's got to explain to the vendor. And if they think it's fair and reasonable and they don't get greedy, sometimes you can get those deals away.
Very good point there. The other one I want to talk about, Ben, is the tactic that a real estate agent uses is the fear of loss. So have you ever been amazed at how many times you show an interest in property and all of a sudden there's another interested buyer?
It's like they just come out of the woodwork.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? But the cruel thing about that for the buyer is they just never know if it's genuine or not.
Yeah.
So, but my advice is if you've looked in the sold section of the online portals and you have a good idea of price, you don't need to be intimidated by that tactic because there's two options in that tactic. It's either true or it's not, right? So, but you're never going to find out. So what I would suggest to people to do in that situation, just go, look, I'm actually interested in this property and I know we've got to act quickly. So in the interest of time, has the other guy done a building inspection that I might be able to buy for half price?
Oh, there's a bit of gold.
And put them on the spot. And the key here is you need to be able to read their body language because you've got to be able to decipher if what comes out of their mouth next is actually a porky or the truth. But that's the best way quickly to let them know. Another thing to do is say, okay, that's great. I am interested in this property. I can't make a decision straight away, but please don't discount me from this property. Because what it does is it puts some time in between the stimulus and the response. Because what the agent wants to do is stimulate you into the fear of loss so that you make a panicked reaction, or they can watch your body language because that's what they're doing. Whereas if you just put a bit of time between that stimulus and response, you have a better chance of making a better decision. You might have to make a decision in the next 2 hours, but at least the agent has lost the power in making you panic, and you've let them know that you're interested in the property. And any agent, if we go back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast, is trying to get a premium price. The only way they can do that is create competition. They're not generally, and sometimes they do, but not generally speaking, they're not going to go and negotiate without you being involved. So you can flush out a bit of the, let's say the porkies that could come in your approach by not panicking straight away to that fear of loss statement.
Yeah, and so, again, as licensed real estate agents, we've done the same courses and we've got the same qualifications as the selling agents do. Now, when you go through those courses, you are taught that it's illegal to lie, and naturally it is. But here's the difference. What the lies are are half-truths. So, the classic one, we have another interested party. This is part of the art of negotiation. We have another interested party. So your question that you asked about that is, are they ready to go? Mine is sometimes along the lines of, are they still interested? In other words, try and drill down to, are they still active on the property? Because they're not telling the whole truth. They're just basically telling a half truth. Yeah. And so you're trying to weed that out. The other classic one is, they've had a change of circumstances. So my favourite line straight after that is, are they getting divorced? Because it's a direct question that's not just, if you've nailed it and it's a relationship breakdown, how do they not answer that? Like they have to answer, are they getting divorced? Yes, so all of a sudden the circumstances are different and they have to sell. So you know that this is a legitimate buying opportunity.
The key point you're asking there is an open question rather than a closed one. You
Correct.
Don't want to give them a question that's yes or no. I would say when you said before, is the other person interested? It gives them the opportunity to say yes. Is the other person prepared to make an offer today?
Yeah.
So that it's
which is a great line.
Because what I'm trying to do, that's still a yes no, but what I'm trying to do is give them, they have to think about their response in a way that they can, because they don't want to blatantly lie. I must admit, my first mentor in the buyer's agency space said to me, and this is a full apology to any real estate agent who's listening to this podcast, but he said, if a real estate agent tells you it's a fact, check it, and if it's their opinion, it's a lie. So not overly complimentary for the real estate agents, and we've got, full disclosure, we've got some great real estate agent friends out there, but
that's why Bryce is the best in Australia, because notice his the way in which he talks to the agent, the subtle changes in the way in which he approaches those questions are giving him the subtle indicators that he's reading to make determinations of how close we are on securing that property.
Mate,
so that's why you're the best of the breed.
Very kind. The Alan Pease, the body language guy, he's got a book called Questions Are the Answers. Yeah. And for me, that's always the response. In anything I do, questions are the answers. So I'm always looking to ask the question. I'm doing it every day, so I'm ready. But
I love it.
Questions are the answers. The best counsellors in the world, bar none, are not the ones who give the most wisdom. They're the ones that ask the most questions, that allow the person who's sitting on the couch to find all the answers they have that they already knew were there. So they bring it out themselves. So questions are the answers no matter what field you do. It's no different in negotiating.
Great bit of advice, not only for property investment, but for life in general.
For life in general. So a couple of quick ones as we're running out of time. Rental guides, Ben, I would say to our clients, I would say that to our clients,
yes,
but
certainly do say that to you.
But also to our listeners that beware of the rental guide from the real estate agent. If they're probably thinking that if we think the general market is 70% owner occs, 30% investors, we're in investment speak all day, every day, but they're not.
Yeah.
So they may not be prepared as well as we are for that question. So the point in saying this is I've asked that many real estate agents, what do you think we'll rent for? And I can see the white in their eyes, and they just go, this one would rent for $400 a week. And they've got no clue.
Yeah, and it's always going to be loaded on the upside.
Correct.
Because ultimately the last thing they want to see is like, oh, I just lost a buy because I've underquoted what the rent is, where I really know it's probably $350 a week.
Yeah.
So we always do separate due diligence on the rental.
Get the rental assessment in writing from their rental department, because they're going to be held accountable to what they put in writing. There'll be a big disclaimer that says, it depends on market conditions, but don't rely on a verbal estimate. You need to rely on a written estimate. And a subsection of that is, if you get offered a rental guarantee, warning.
How many times have we said rental guarantees are just loaded into the price people pay? I'll just say another thing on that, Bryce. For us, we obviously get a lot more data than the average day punter on the street. But the other big thing is, so if I was someone who doesn't have access to that data, I'd ring up a local property management agent who has no vested interest other than tell you the truth and say, number 1 Smith Street up the road, it's a 3-bedroom. If I bought it, what do you think you could get? And then check it with 2, competing agents and get a fair market on that. And then obviously you'll see between the 3 of them, which is obviously the selling agent's property management team, and these 2 others. If you're not quite sure, do that. And that will give you some better guide. Because usually when I ring up those other agents, I'm always like, what do you think? And they go, no, I'm probably not in the market that we're in at the moment. So build a little bit of rapport, explain to them what you're trying to do. Look, I'm interested in this property. If I do buy it, I would definitely consider you. So that gives them an incentive to make sure that they're doing the right thing. and so have a listen to what they say.
Very good insight there, Ben. Our buyers team, they're professional buyers. They have a network of property managers all the time that we tap into to ask those questions, because they give you some of the best intel that the selling agent won't give you. All right, so there you go, folks. If you're in the market today, tomorrow, next week, going for an auction sometime soon, there's just a few things for you to maybe outsmart the real estate agent, or just at least level the playing field to give you a better chance of getting a better outcome. So, Ben, at this point, for probably the last, 6 to 10 weeks, you've given us a negative gearing update. Perhaps it's worth having a very quick chat about the possibility of a hung parliament, or the coalition getting in without a majority. Because all of our listeners will want to know what that flow-on impact might look like for the proposed changes to negative gearing. Have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I can do a pretty quick wrap-up. Labor can't form government. It's impossible for them. They just simply don't have the numbers to get to that magical 76. So it's more likely that we'll get a coalition minority government or slight majority government. So counting is still continuing. We probably won't have the complete answer until late tomorrow night, being Friday night, or as early as next week. So the reality is it's looking more and more likely that we'll see a coalition minority government, and that, with the likes of Bob Katter and the Xenophon team, sort of guaranteeing supply on those certain issues. So it's obviously not the parliament you want. It is a circus. It will be very difficult for the mainstream reform that we desperately need across total taxation and other sort of things in terms of reducing that spending, and that's going to affect business confidence and sentiment. So from a negative gearing point of view, we don't expect any changes. If we then have to go back to the polls in the next 18 months, it will probably flare again, because the argument from the Labor Party is it's still a revenue raiser for them for all of the spending that they're promising to try and win power.
So would it be fair to say then, just playing on that, because you follow this quite closely, the 18-month, if we're at the polls again, and then there'd need to be an introduction. So any changes to, if we go worst case scenario, any changes to negative gearing would be at least 2.5 years away under that scenario. Yeah, if Labor was to pursue that policy.
Again, I wouldn't be rushing. There was reports of people rushing out trying to buy properties before Labor would have changed their policy. It's not sensible to be doing that. You buy property for the long term. Negative gearing is only a moment in time. It's not a strategy. It's a stupid strategy if you're adopting it. You're buying the wrong properties if you are. So just make sure that you understand that. And I think longer term, there will still be some pressures around the capital gains. And we do want speculators out of the market. So we want these people who are speculating on property to come out of the market, because they do drive properties up because they don't know what they're doing. So if there is some type of 5-year term where, if you sell a property, you may have to pay a higher tax on any gains, that is not a bad thing. But for the longer term, I still think we've got the balance right on negative gearing. And it's been part of the market dynamic. So when you fluff around with that, you're going to cause some type of pain for the short term.
I think the important point is for the listeners is to remember there's always noise. I mean, I've been advising property when GST came in and people weren't positive cash flow from day one every time. We've had a GFC, we've had numerous changes to governments, we've had
recessions.
Yep. And ultimately the property has continued to grow in value. So through the week, I remember a quote that I listened to, Jim Rohn's a favourite of mine: if you don't like your present address, change it. You're not a tree. And by address, he's talking about your current situation in life. Yeah. So there's no point sitting there in terms of waiting for the seasons that are going to be there. You've got to sow the seed, you've got to plant the seed, you've got to water it, you've got to nurture it, and you've got to plant it at the right season of life. So these things are going to come and go, but you still got to plan positively household finances. And if
you want change, what are you willing to change? Which is ultimately the story. You want to get fit and you're sitting on the couch, are you going to get fit? No, you're going to have to enact change for that to occur. Well, no difference in this. I mean, this podcast is all about saying to people, make your money work a bit harder for you. There are risks. In everything we do, there's going to be risks. So try and mitigate those risks. And we're just trying to improve your probability of getting it right. Because ultimately, it's not an exact science.
There you go, folks. If you're one of those people who are just waiting back to see what the government does or what the tax regime changes, as Jim Rohn says, if you don't like your present address, change it. You're not a tree, mate. As you scramble.
Oh yeah, mate. I'm highly organised. I've kept it on the same page. and I can see Tibetan right in front of me.
Yeah.
So Tibet, great part of the world, they say. Very, very lovely people.
Isn't it highly mindful in Tibet? Isn't there
Mindful. A lot of a lot of monks and a lot of absolutely. You know, one of the highest parts of the world. Okay, so we're going to say see you later. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Gemma Jong Jong. Gem.
That's
I was just like Gemma Jong Jong. J Jong. Gemma J Jong.
Where is Tibet? Which is that?
It's part of China,
Asia.
remember? They have that problem. They don't want to be part of China, but they're part of the China.
Oh, I'm just showing my geographical ignorance there.
Gemma,
all right, folks. Well,
Gemma J Jong.
I'm going to say of all the sign-offs you've ever done, without a shadow of a doubt, that one there was definitely the most recent. And on that note, folks, we will see you next week.
Gemma Jong Jong.